You are back in the Email Mojo Dojo, and this is Travis Sago, and I hope that's you. Hopefully you're having a great day. I want to go ahead and start rolling in because we have some exciting things to cover. Today we're going to be talking about CAP, C-A-P, Sales Mojo. And before we roll into that, I want to just do a brief recap and then just give you some I guess you'd call it fatherly love before we roll in. But let's recap. So far, we've talked about the circle of money. We started up at the 12 o'clock position, talked about problems, and then rolling into bonding, and then rolling into marketing. And we've covered things such as the triangle of insight, hell and heaven island, and offer positioning. So now that we are learning how to nurture and water the fruit trees of our currency, we're going to start moving into how to pick some of the fruit in a really cool way to give us a maximum harvest without damaging the tree. So excited to be doing that. So today we're going to be covering CAP Sales Mojo. Before we roll into that, though, because I've been talking to some folks rolling through the course, folks are doing a great job, and I applaud you, especially if you've been taking lots of action and writing the emails and getting some results. At the same time, I would like to encourage you, if you've sent less than 10 emails at this point, don't be afraid to ramp it up. There's a quote by, I believe it's Zig Ziglar, that says skinny, well, I blew that one, that says timid salespeople have skinny kids. I like to say timid business people have skinny kids. But you know, I was just rereading Soichiro Honda's story. Soichiro Honda was the gentleman in Japan who started up Honda. They started out with motorcycles, and they actually started out just putting motors on bikes. He figured out a way to put a motor on a bike. He was very poor at the time, had very, very little resources. And one of the things he did for investment capital was back in those days, I think it was like early 1940s-ish, circa 1940s. They didn't have crowdfunding back then. But he got the idea that maybe the bicycle shops, which are many in Japan, bicycling is bigger in Japan. I've lived there for 3 years. It's even bigger in Japan than it is here. There's many, many bicycle shops. But he got the idea that maybe if he wrote to these bicycle shops, that he could get some of these bicycle shops to invest money with him for his new motorized bike, which would be a motorcycle. And so he sent off a bunch of letters. Guess what happened? Nothing. So he sent off more letters, and he sent off more letters, and over time he sent off hundreds, if not thousands, of letters, many to the same bicycle shops over and over and over again. And slowly the money started to come in, and he used that money to build his first prototypes. And then as his prototypes moved along, he had more stuff to write to his bicycle shops about, and just kept on with that writing campaign. And of course now today, Honda not only sells motorcycles, but they sell one of the leaders in cars and sports utility vehicles and many, many other type of vehicles, all from a little seed campaign where he was very bold, but he also did it in a way where he didn't turn off people. So it would be shocking to me, or what a sad place we'd be living in, if he gave up after he sent 5 letters or 6 letters, or if he just never sent any letters at all. You know, what would this world be without Honda? There's lots of things, other things that came about because of his inventions, which I'm not going to get into, but without that seed money, what would this world be like right now? So if there's a person listening to me that doesn't have something worthwhile to share and value to the world, if it's not very good, then maybe you don't want to send any more email. Maybe you don't want to be assertive or aggressive. But I have a feeling that if you're here, you have something to share with the world that's going to change lives. So I would implore you to not be timid. If you follow what we've been talking about with the triangle of insight, you are not going to piss people off. I mean, there's always going to be a few outliers that regardless of what you say, they're going to have some negative feedback. You can't help that. But if you have something good to share with the world, for heaven's sake, don't stop after 3 emails or 5 emails. This is a multi-million dollar, in Honda's case, a multi-billion-dollar skill. And it's not about the writing. It's not that Soichiro Honda's writing got better within those campaigns. It's the nature of psychology and repetition and frequency, everything that we've been going over that make these campaigns work. So you can't go out to your orange grove or your garden and say, wow, I watered you 5 times. Where's all my fruit? I'm just going to stop doing this if there's not fruit there after 5 times. I have been doing this 11 years. I've sold, it was a rough estimate, conservative estimate, $20+ million worth of goods and services online. Majority of that done through email. And I still have times where I go 4 or 5 or more emails without putting sales numbers on the board. And sometimes that's strategic. I just did in August did a $94,000 campaign with a very, very small list. And the first 5 emails, all a big fat goose egg. Okay, so you can't go out to your orchard and say, well, I watered you 4 days in a row, and now you're not growing me nothing. I'm done with you. So if you have, and I think you do, if you have something worthwhile to put out to the world that's going to change lives, that is what you should focus your commitment on, and what you can do for the world or for your community or whatever your particular focus is there. So that is my loving fatherly advice. If you haven't sent at least 10 emails at this point, I would encourage you to just drop whatever thoughts, drop whatever fears that you may have, and just go ahead and ramp it up. They don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be long. They just need to be fun, and they need to have that braingasm, that aha insight. Cool. So let's move in to the CAP Sales Mojo. I get really, really excited about this because I'm human too. You know, even though I'm encouraging you to go out and water your garden and nurture it and be patient, it's always fun to pick off the right fruit. It's fun to see the fruits of our labor, if you will. And I get excited about this. My clients get excited. My students get excited about this too because nobody's really talking about this. Nobody's really teaching this. There is one gentleman in our course right now, Lee Bacham, is a relationship counselor, and he's studied many different forms of psychology and stuff. It's always fun bantering back and forth with him. So I think he's probably the only one that knows what the CAP stands for at this point, and that's totally cool. But let's go ahead and explain the letters of CAP. CAP is an abbreviation, and it comes from a study of psychology that got really popular in the late 1960s called transactional analysis. In short, transactional analysis is a way of interpreting social interactions. Isn't that what we're doing, right? In sales, we're pretty much having a social interaction, especially with email or especially now on Facebook. So it's funny that in the late 1960s, studied social interaction, which I think is really, I've used this and done very, very well on Facebook posts, done very, very well on writing advertorials that drive traffic to the pages, even without a lot of nurturing and warming up. So when you have CAP in your arsenal, along with everything else we've been teaching you, you become, I don't want to say deadly, that's the first word that came to my mind, but you become very, very effective at growing and nurturing and picking of the fruit. Eric Berne, I actually became aware of transactional analysis. I won't go long into the history of it, but there's a couple of books if you want to get them and go deeper than I'm going to go, that's cool. But transactional analysis first came out with Eric Berne, The Games People Play, about 1964. The first time I came in contact with it was my mom was taking a college course. I think I was probably 9 or 10. She was taking a sociology course, and she had a bunch of books, and I was fascinated with all the books, but one really stood out called I'm Okay, You're Okay by Thomas Anthony Harris. then after that stage, I really didn't come much into contact with transactional analysis. I always remember what the CAP stood for, and I'm kind of teasing you a little bit. But I found it really, really helpful in my social interactions to understand. But I came back again across it. I think it was probably late 80s, early 90s with a gentleman named David Sandler who did the Sandler sales system. He's passed away recently. But he was the first person to bring transactional analysis into the sales arena. I think it still is the #1 sales training platform out there in the offline world. Very, very powerful. Matter of fact, one of the only sales books that I recommend, because I think most sales books just screw you up more than help you, but one of the only sales books I recommend is from David Sandler. You Can't Learn to Ride a Bike in a Seminar, which leans very, very heavily on CAP. So what are those letters? C stands for child, A stands for adult, and P stands for parent. So what they discovered in transactional analysis, and I'm making this just bluntly simple and taking out a lot of the geek work, but by and large, we have, and they called them tapes back in the day because they didn't have digital stuff like MP3s and all that stuff. So back in the day, they said humans basically have 3 tapes running at all times. We have a child tape. The child tape is only, I would say not only, but primarily interested in emotion. I want, gimme. It understands the emotion and what that person wants. Then there's the adult tape. The adult tape is the logical side. The logical side is just to give me the facts, ma'am. Let's leave emotion out of this. Just give me the logic behind it. And then there's the parental tape. There's actually 2 sides to the parental tape, which we'll be discussing a lot about in tonality when we are writing emails. But the 2 sides, and the main purpose of the parent tape is to be the judger, to judge things good or bad, or right or wrong, or if it'll work or it won't work. And then we have 2 sides to the parent tape. We have nurturing parent, and we also have critical parent. Critical parent is kind of like that voice in your head that's always putting you down, or is putting other people down, or putting other things down, or saying this shouldn't be that way. Nurturing parent is like mom after you fell down and scraped your knee, or you brought home a report card that was less than great, and they said, hey, you did a great job, you can do better, you can work harder, but that's great, very good. Kind of the nurturing side, and we'll talk about these a little bit deeper when we get into the tonality. But we're going to quickly move this into the sales arena. Again, I've leaned a lot on David Sandler, but I've put this into practice for many, many, many years, all across different media, but especially works especially well in email. But I want to give you a different model that makes it easy for me to remember. And I want you to understand like the emotional process as well as I can that people go through. And I'm going to do some grunting and oohing and ahhing because it's the only way I know how to get this across. But I want you to imagine a person that comes across something that they want. All of a sudden, this say just comes across a headline that they like, right? So there's this oh wow moment. So just imagine their face, eyes spread, their mouth open. Wow. This is the first response. It's usually a dopamine rushing into the system. This is the child being activated, as I call it. We activate the child. I want to talk about how to do this, but I want you to understand this first. But milliseconds and up to seconds after you activate this oh wow response with the child, the first thing that happens is I want you to imagine that person taking their index finger and pointing it to their temple and going, This is the logical response. As soon as we see something we really want, it's like the ooh. Then we go, how does that work? And we don't always just think, how does it work? But it happens, like I said, in milliseconds sometimes. So we have the overt, we have the child goes, oh wow, imagine that face. Then imagine the finger going up to the temple going, If there's not a logical explanation, that cuts the buying sequence, that cuts the circuit. If there's not an oh wow child response, the buying sequence doesn't even get started. If you start with the analytical, if you start in your messaging with the analytical, it's not going to work as well without invoking the child first. So we've got, oh wow, big face, right? Oh wow. Then we got the finger to the template. But then we have one other thing that we need to overcome. Right after we've answered the adult, then they do something else. Imagine that person spreads their legs and their hands go on their hips and they look very skeptical. This is the judger. And it's usually like, hey, I've seen something like this before. It won't work for me. I don't believe you. Some form or fashion. So we have the child. Oh, wow. Then it goes to the adult. And then hands on the hips. Ooh. Ooh. Now, it happens even faster than that. It can happen even slower than that. But these are the things, whether we're working on it in one ad, one email, or a process of emails, or over a time, these are the things that we're constantly focusing on. And we want to have elements of all of them, and especially in our sales messaging. Sometimes we'll lean harder. Many, many times near the end of a campaign, we'll be leaning a lot on the parent, right? Because we already know they want what we're offering. We've made kitchen table logic or a logical reason why or proof that they can have it, but there's still the judger, and it's this judger. It's like, this won't work for me, or will this work for me, that holds up the sales process very often. So just to kind of, it's so important. Ooh, I want that. Then it goes, how does it work? And then, will it work for me? Ooh, I want that. How does it work? Will it work for me? Ooh, I want that. How does it work? Will it work for me? We don't necessarily think those, but I want you to understand that process that's happening, the CAP process. So how do we make this happen? What invokes the child, right? What invokes the child? What invokes the adult? And what invokes the parent? What satisfies the parent, right? So we want to invoke the child, and then we're actually satisfying the adult and satisfying the parent. This took me years to kind of figure out. I've leaned on other technologies kind of putting this together, but this little sequence works a dream, and we're going to work this even harder. But what invokes the child, part of the beauty of what we're doing here is a lot of this we've already covered in the Triangle of Insight. That's why if you're doing your fun work or your homework, going through this will get easier and easier, not harder and harder. But what invokes the child better than anything else is an overt benefit. Overt simply means blatant, clear, obvious. That'll be something they can see, a contrast, right? Something that stubs their eyeballs or hits, especially emotion, you want them to hit them in the heart, right, with a benefit. Something that cannot be cloudy. It cannot be like, okay. It's got to be overt. Now, overt doesn't necessarily mean hypey or exciting, right? It's just got to be meaningful to them and clear. They have to immediately understand it. If there's any confusion at all, if you have to explain it at all, it's like trying to explain a punchline to a joke. If you have to explain it, it didn't work. You're not on it. I'm going to give you an example here in a minute. So I want you to write down child and a dash, overt benefit. You invoke the child with an overt benefit. Adult. Lots of ways we can offer proof, and what we're basically saying is how do we prove it to the adult? What's the analytical? How do we give them the logic, right? David Sandler was the one that came up with it. People buy on emotion and they justify with logic. How do we justify to the adult? There's multiple different ways we can justify to the adult. I've tried several. I've done deep study. And again, you're going to love this because we've already kind of worked this into the system. One of the top ways is testimonials for proof. You probably say, oh, no shit, Travis. I know that. The challenge with testimonials, well, there's many challenges. One is if you're just getting started or have testimonials for your offer, you may not have those. Also for us, we have to be careful how we word testimonials to be in compliance with the FTC and all these other alphabet agencies. So it's interesting that right after testimonials, and this is a scientific and study and polls, not just me telling you this, but right after that is what they call kitchen table logic. Doug Hall called it kitchen table logic. And if you think about the triangle of insight, what are we using? We're using metaphors, right? We're using analogies. We're using similes. So we're already covering a lot of these. But kitchen table logic, I lean on over and over and over again. The benefits to kitchen table logic is it's just a hair less powerful than testimonial. But it's always readily available to us. People like understanding things like, oh, it's like this, it's like that. And it proves, it serves as proof. Even though if we're not careful, we can lead people in the wrong places with it, but kitchen table logic is extremely powerful. It's always available to us, and it's fun to use. So for the adult, very often we use KTL, good old KTL, kitchen table language. And then for justifying to the parent, there's several ways we can justify to the parent. But for our purposes, and what's found to be the most powerful by marketing studies, again, these are listed in both of Doug Hall's book, but what he calls a dramatic difference. Some people call it a USP. I know, oh, not the USP, right? And I don't think it has to be as complicated as the USP, but there has to be something clearly different. Because what the mind does, what the human mind does, is say, ooh, I want that. I understand that, but this is like this, so it's not going to work for me, right? So there has to be something dramatically different in order to appease the parent. I'm not saying to go off and have your people buy something new all the time, but when you think of the BSO, bright, shiny object syndrome, it's the parent. It's part of the reason why they're bright and shiny, because they're appealing to the parent. They're probably not thinking about doing that, but new and improved, different appeals to the parent. They're like, oh, maybe this will work, right? You see this all the time in the health supplement space or the diet pill space. You know, first it's Hoodia, right? Then it's Garcinia Cambogia, right? And they give these different properties and like, oh, that's different. So we want to have something that's dramatically different. And part of how we've done it, again, this all wraps around, right? When we were talking about Hell and Heaven Island, what's dramatically different is typically the obstacles or the options and how we position. And we're going to get into some examples here and some fun work for you guys. But just to recap really quickly, to recap the CAP, you got child, adult, parent, child emotion, adult analytical or logic, and the parent is the judger. How we're going to invoke the child is with use of overt benefit. The adult, we're going to use kitchen table logic. And the parent, a dramatic difference. We're going to find how we're dramatically different. Not dramatically better. It doesn't have to be dramatically better, just different, clearly different. What's different? And making it meaningfully different to them. That may turn off some buyers, and that's okay. If I only sell red shoes, there's no point in bringing people that buy blue shoes to my website. Say, hey, we only sell red shoes. We're on a website that sells red shoes. We have more shades of red shoes than anybody else. So if you're not finding that exact shade that you're looking for to match that dress, come to the Red Shoe Emporium, right? Where we don't sell blue shoes, green shoes, turquoise shoes. We only sell 1,000 different shades of red. Maybe that's a bad example, but we could do the same thing. So let's walk through an example real quickly from, I'll just use my life and brick and mortar stuff. Well, it was kind of brick and mortar, I guess you would say. I kind of used some electronics in there too. Back when fax machines were all the rage and inexpensive, every office had a fax machine. I think probably most offices still have a fax machine to this day, but before like a lot of email got it was a primary way of communicating. I started in my little town here a service called it was a fax advertising service is what it was. I called it the River Valley Fax Club because we live in a River Valley here, and everybody calls it the River Valley, not Russellville. So it's called the River Valley Tax Club. And it did really, really well, really, really quickly, and because it had all of these elements in place. So I'm not going to take you through the whole birth and the origin, but we want to kind of take a look at why it did so well. And basically what we would do, my primary customer, my primary client was a restaurant. I sold it to a few other people, but restaurants were the best for this. We'd send out their daily lunch specials, and we'd send out coupons, and we'd send them out to all the offices here in town. Let's look at the overt benefit. How did I appeal to the child? How do we appeal to the child? It was kind of interesting. On my first few sales calls, I was talking about putting more butts in seats. I thought that would be I didn't call it the overt benefit at the time, but I thought that would be the major benefit. They want more butts in seats. And that got me a few ears, but sitting down talking, is still open, a steakhouse here in town, talking to a gentleman named Mike Brady. He said, Travis, what I'm really interested in is more carry-out orders. And luckily, I really questioned him. Yeah, I was like, I'm curious, why carry-out orders? And he explained to me that for every person that comes in as a walk-in and sits down, that requires a certain amount of real estate. But people can call in and they can deliver that food. It's just as profitable. They don't take up the real estate, and they can literally, their throughput on carry-out orders is 3 or 4 times the turnover they can get just by bringing people into the restaurant. So I'm like, ding, 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 ding. And as soon as I started changing my messaging to talking about carry-out orders, the child, everybody did carry out, ears really perked up. They got, ooh, I want that. And I tried different things, like just talking about carry out, care about the carry out line ringing off the hook. Again, something they could really see, right? They can hear the carry out line ringing off the hook. And as I started working with a couple more restaurants that the fax advertising was working so well, Mike told me, dude, I had to install a second carry out line. It's like it was just busy all the time. I had to install a second carry-out line. And again, overt benefit. So I started talking about how Mike had to get another carry-out line installed, right? He was talking about, wow. And that really opened up some doors for me. But that is the child. That's the overt benefit, right? But as soon as I say, hey, and I might use that as a opener to go in and talk to them, I said, hey, we've got Mike Brady. We installed the second carry-out line for him. Just wanted to see if you'd be open to me coming and talking to you about how we did that. Of course, because now we've just invoked the child, and the logical mind says, yes, I want to know how you did that. So we're going to go to the KTL, the kitchen table logic. Advertising is expensive if you're a restaurant owner. And again, here we are. We're talking about the obstacles between hell and heaven island. And I'd question, why do you think advertising is so expensive? Well, because I have to advertise to everybody. If I'm post it in the newspaper, I have to advertise it to everybody. I said, is everybody your customer? Like, no. Who's your best customers? The people in the office. Those are the guys who would be giving the carry-out orders. I'd be like, what other kind of advertiser are you using? Well, we use radio. Well, it's kind of the same thing, isn't it? You got to advertise to everybody. But what if we could just advertise to only the offices that have 30, 40, 50 people come in and order carry-outs for lunch, and we could only advertise to them. They're like, oh, that would be awesome. And what if we could do that without having to pay postage? And I could save you that cost. Oh, my God, that would be so awesome. Kitchen table logic, right? I can do that with the fax. And then the dramatic difference there in this particular case, because the dramatic difference may be the only thing, but I was the only one doing it. There's a stark contrast between what I did, and they could see it, right? I would pull out my list of offices that received it. I'd pull out how many people were there. They could literally see where their advertising was going to and who it was going to. And every time I would pull that out, they're like, oh, my gosh, this office comes in or that office comes in, or boy, I said, what if we can make them come in 2, 3, 4 more times a month? Oh, my God, that'd be awesome. They could literally see it, right? It was dramatically different. Have the newspaper guy, like, who gets the newspaper, right? Nobody's showing him, well, this guy gets it. Is he your customer? Nobody's doing that, right? It was dramatically different. I was the only one doing it. Therefore, I did really, really well. We went from 1 page to 2 pages to 3 pages. My biggest problem was sending too many pages, right? That is like the power of the CAP, right? When you get all these things in alignment, when you get that meaningful overt benefit when you have solid kitchen table logic, and then you back it up with a dramatic difference. We handle all of those. It's like, boom. If it's not, boom, then you're missing it somewhere, right? We don't get a whole lot of troubleshooting right now. We'll get into troubleshooting campaigns, but everybody's saying, wow, if you're getting lots of questions, you're like, wow, I would like to do this, but they're not understanding the A, they're not understanding the P, right? Or you're not satisfying the adult part, or you're not satisfying the dramatic difference. So there's another way of looking at this as well, and that's in the tonality that we use. I won't spend a whole lot of time on this, but I do want you to kind of understand the tonality that we use in our emails. I very often ask people, how much of the percent of the time do you think we should speak in the child tone? Should we speak from? We're not speaking about speaking to. We're talking about our tone, the tone we're coming from. How many often times should we speak from the child? Well, give me all kinds of percentage. How often should we speak from the adult? How often should we speak from the parent? How often should we speak from nurturing parent to critical parent? And here's the simple answer. 70% of the time, this is from the Sandler Sales Institute, and I found it works very, very well in email, we want to be speaking from nurturing parent. We want to be nurturing. We want to be understanding. We want to be on the same side of the table as they are. I've seen people drastically change the results they're getting from their email just by moving from a critical parent, because very, very many times the tone of the emails are critical, to a nurturing parent. This doesn't mean we don't say hard things. We just do it in a nurturing parent way. We don't do it in a judgmental way. We do it in a judgmental way, but a nice judgmental way. We don't say if you're trying to start an online business, the reason you're not having success is because you're worthless. If you just work harder, if you would just put everything into place, you would have more success. We say, in a nurturing way, do that. Say, hey, I understand there's a lot of things going on. You've got a business, or you've got a job you're into, you come home, you got to take care of the kids, put clothes in the laundry. Maybe at the end of the night you have an hour, maybe 2 hours to devote to your business. And you've got a hard choice then. Should I kick back and relax for a little while? Should I take some me time? Or do I work on my business? I understand how hard of a choice that can be. Right? You see the difference in the nurturing? So 70% of the time we want to come from nurturing parent. 30% of the time will be from the adult. We'll just be like, here's the facts, ma'am. In fact, right, we'll say, here's the facts, here's the facts, or we're presenting our kitchen table logic. Never do we come from the child. Matter of fact, we'll squash results with a child tone, and never with critical parent. And usually when I say, hey, people say, hey, Travis, what about Rich Jerk? What about, Ben Settle style emails? If you use a critical tone, you've got to be an expert and understanding how to position it so it doesn't come off critically to the person that's receiving it. And if you go and read most of those, they're not necessarily being critical to the person, or they're so overtly critical in such an expert way that it's funny, right? That's a lot. Again, this is the program for people that don't write well. All we're doing is finding out what people want and figuring out how to position it and letting time and sequencing and building of the bond work for us, not fancy writing. If you want to be a fancy writer and learn all those tips and techniques and walk that fine edge, that's totally cool. That's not what we do here. So, and again, this is not coming from me, but Sandler Sales Institute, 70% nurturing parent, 30% adult. And I find that works magic for me. It develops bonds, it develops friendships, it develops sales all along the way. And it's so much less tricky to use. So let's talk a little about where to use CAP. We kind of use it everywhere, really. We use it kind of everywhere, and I'll point out different places that we use it. If you'll notice the triangle of insight, when we talk about escaping from Hell Island, in the lower left-hand corner, symptoms of Hell Island, or visions of Heaven Island, we're really coming up with overt benefits, right? And then we move over to the wisdom and the metaphor, which is the analytical side, right? We kind of go using kitchen table logic just by working with the triangle of insight. What we don't hit a lot on in the triangle of insight is the judger, the parent, right? So we might want to focus with more intensity now. If we're trying to get somebody to buy something, we're trying to do a lot of heavy lifting inside of the email. If we're just trying to get them to watch a video or trying to get them to go on a webinar, maybe we don't have to hit it too hard. And I'll give you an example here in a minute. Actually, I'll give you an example right now. My overt benefit, let's say just an Email Mojo email. Let's say that I'm trying to get a girl to go watch a video sales letter or go read an article or just something not heavy lifting, but we're going to use some dramatic difference here as well. But the overt benefit may be getting him to return your text in 5 minutes or less. The one thing that I get more and more email about now and more comments is how long it takes guys to return text. It's like this, it's a symptom of Hell Island for them. So by saying one secret to get him to return your text in 5 minutes or less, that would be invoke her child. And then the kitchen table logic could simply be it's about how to use curiosity and self-interest. And I could use a metaphor for curiosity and self-interest. We'll get him to return text in 5 minutes or less. Rather than talking about yourself, and I would do that in a very nurturing way. You know, I said rather than talking about your day, if you use self-interest and curiosity, you're going to see him return the text a lot quicker. Now, there's a natural spot, a natural opening for that, which will lead me, hey, if you want one more secret and how to use his curiosity and interest to get him to return that text in 5 minutes or less, then go watch this video or go click this link. Now, what do I do in the parent is, because we're handling objections, right? What is she thinking? Now, I'm using the word secret. I've used the word secret multiple times. Maybe she's thinking, man, everybody's talking about this. You know, everybody uses secrets, right? So I would just say that. I might say, hey, I know the word secret gets used a lot, right? Gets thrown around a lot. Now, so this is different. If it really is, right? Again, if you burn people, you know, shame on you. The second time it's going to be shame on them, right? But they're just going to stop doing what you want them to do. But, you know, so you could say, hey, I know a lot of people throwing around the word secrets these days. This is truly something I don't think you've heard before unless you've heard it from me, right? That would be maybe enough. I'm just trying to get her to watch a VSL or a webinar to get her to click on that link. She's like, oh yeah, you know, that makes sense, right? If I'm trying to get her to buy something, I might have to go into more depth on that. You can also recap it, right? A re-cap. So you come through, you give them your Email Mojo for the day, then you can recap where you want them to go, right? So let's say you talk about return that text in 5 minutes or less. You give them your kitchen table logic that's wrapped in your wisdom, and you just recap it. So hey, if you'd like another secret to get them to return text in 5 minutes or less, if it worked on the opening, it might work here again, then click on this link. You learn how to use a different style of self-interest and curiosity, and maybe how to even do follow-on text with that. Now, I know everybody throws this word secret around a lot, so we're recapping it, right? Child, adult, parent again. So you use child, adult, parent in multiple places, in multiple focuses, and we're going to really start hitting it hard in the Rainmaker campaign. The first part of our campaign focuses on child and over benefit. Then a section focuses on the kitchen table logic, and then most of the rest of it is focusing on the parent, right? Now, in each email, though, we're still talking child, adult, parent. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but kind of want you guys to understand that there. Cool. So let's roll into our fun work, which is, I'm trying to brand this fun work. I don't know if it's working or not, but this would be the homework section. So I'm going to give you guys kind of a framework to use that will not only help you with your cap for what's coming up, which is your Rainmaker campaign, which is your 10-day to 14-day campaign, but it'll help you in lots of other places as well. So here's your fun work. I want you to come up with a simple plot, and I want to talk about what a simple plot is, and cap for your program, your product, or your service using the cap framework. And this is going to get you set up for your Rainmaker campaign. So your Rainmaker campaign is a 10 to 14-day campaign. What we basically want to do is set up the simple plot for it. What's the theme going to be for your Rainmaker campaign? And we want to start out with that overall. We can always have subplots, but we want the overall simple plot. What's the overall plot going to be of your 10 to 14-day campaign? If you don't know what the word plot means, that's okay, or kind of focus on it. We're going to kind of cover that here. So your plot in the simplest form needs a hero with a worthwhile goal, and something or somebody is stopping them. So let me say that again. Your plot needs a hero, and we're going to call hero Pat, right? Pat is on Hell Island. We need a hero with a worthwhile goal. What's the worthwhile goal? Heaven Island. And it needs to be worthwhile. It can't just be, I want to be big pimping in my Lambo, right? It's got to be something that would be meaningful to the rest of the world, right? Oh, Pat just wants to make a lot of money so she could be big pimping in her Lambo. That's not going to be a very good plot, right? Now, if she's got a very talented young son that wants to get into Ivy League school, but they're having a hard time affording it, then that's different, right? That's like, wow, that's something meaningful, right? So Pat will always be our hero. Our hero, and some people get this confused, they make the product the hero. We don't want to make the product the hero. Pat's always the hero. Our reader's always the hero. Or whoever you're telling the story about is the hero. They have a worthwhile goal and something or somebody that stops them. That's the conflict. So we have a hero with a conflict. And then we have a resolution. So Pat's on Hell Island, wants to get to Heaven Island. There are sharks in between. What does Pat do? If we just end the story with never figuring out what Pat does to either get off the island or get eaten, it doesn't have the emotional payoff or the sales payoff. And we could do it either way. Pat, we could end the story with Pat getting off Hell Island and making it over to Heaven Island, or we could have Pat get eaten by the sharks. Either way, for storytelling, it's fine. If we're using that to sell product, though, then we have to be more careful how we use it, right? It's a shame that Pat got eaten by the sharks. If she would have had our Powerboat 9000, she would have navigated the sharks with no problem. But you have to be careful with it, because otherwise it seems like you're setting Pat's island on fire, right? So I would caution you to make the resolution your product and a successful outcome. If you want to be a great writer, again, you can do the bad outcome. But again, this is about making sales, making friends, influencing people, and making a lot of money without being a great writer. So let me just recap that again. We're going to go over some examples here. Plot needs a hero with a worthwhile goal and something or somebody that stops them. And then we need a resolution, right? Just think again, this whole course gets easier if you've done all your fun work and study at this point. Pat's on Hell Island, wants to get to Heaven Island. What's stopping? What's stopping here, right? So let me show you like a short, simple plot. This is kind of what I do is I'm kind of going through. I'll start with something really short and simple. I might make it a little bit longer, and then I'll kind of look at how I'm going to do my cap inside of that. So the short, simple plot is, and we just use this as an example, is a question I use is what do they want, right? And it must be worthwhile. What do they want? What's their Heaven Island? And it has to be clear. It has to be specific. It has to be overt. It's got to be blatant. Can't be Pat wants to feel less overwhelmed. Like you can't see overwhelm, right? Pat wants to stop being so stressed. It's not overt. So let's just take my example. Pat, who's an online business owner or a business owner, she wants to spend more time with the kids and still be a financial hero. That's a meaningful benefit, right? Pat wants to spend more time with the kids and still be a financial hero. My next question is what's stopping them? This helps you figure out the enemy. What's the enemy? What's the conflict, right? Again, we want to be something that we can see if at all possible, or that we can dramatize. The simpler, the easier it is to see, the better it's going to work. So what's stopping them? So in this particular example, it could be time and knowing how to keep, and the know-how to keep her stuck working and away from her kids. She doesn't have the time. That's pretty easy to see, right? I don't have the time. It's a big enemy. Time is the enemy. I don't like making gurus the enemy, like all the gurus are holding secrets back from you, or the government. You know, sometimes the government's good to pick on, but when you think about it, government's really not that easy to see, right? People have different definitions of government. So unless you know your people's definition of government, you may not want to use that as an enemy. But I like the things that we can just like, it's almost non-judgmental. It's not judging other people. So time and know-how keep her stuck working and away from her kids. So what's missing? That's the next question. What's missing? This helps you lead to the resolution. Well, she wants a way to sell big ticket without being on the phone all the time, without needing to spend hours on webinars, or figuring out a VSL or hiring a copywriter. And without needing to be a copywriter at all, the discovery is going to be Email Mojo. Then here's just some bonus points. If you can tie into something current that would be meaningful for your people, like the election, for example, like I'm getting ready to do a campaign, we're going to talk about personal economy. So if you're really worried about, the U.S. economy and the world economy, you can take your focus off that and just focus on your personal economy, right? But if you can tie it into something current, that's more bonus points for you. The drawback to that is you may not be able to use it as an evergreen, right? So if I talk about the election coming up on this campaign, I may not be able to talk about that for a while after that, right? I have to come up with a new angle. So you have evergreen angles and you have specific angles. But for bonus points, you can tie it into something specific or current that works really, really well. Here's something I really, really want you to see. We're going to take a longer, we're going to take that short example and draw it out a little bit, but I could speak to a whole nother Pat, right? I could speak to a Pat who wants to be on the phone, but she hates that she has to talk to 9 people to make one sale. I could focus on that. Same product, but I could focus on that. But so I want you to understand that we have different angles that we can use. It's part of the magic of what we do. But we have different angles for what we use. Obviously, if we run a 10-day or 14-day campaign, though, we want to hit an angle that's going to resonate with a chunk of our people. But trying to get everybody on there is not going to be as powerful, right? So we want to hit it and resonate with a 10-day or 14-day campaign that's going to resonate with a section of our audience that will lead to sales, right? We don't want to just pick one person. Hey, if you're working in Ohio as, a elephant coach, right? Because then we're only be talking to one person. Let me take this out. And this is kind of what I do. This is, I'll take the short example and I'll expand it out to a longer example. So here's kind of what do they want. Pat is always at work feeling guilty when she's at work. Now, I would never say feeling guilty in an email, but I'm just doing this for myself, right? I would highlight what's the feeling guilty about. I would make that into a mind movie. What's feeling guilty about? It's 5:30 p.m. You just got that text from your son. He's saying, Mom, are you going to make it to my soccer game? You've completely forgot about his soccer game, right? I would do that. I would dramatize that. I wouldn't just say feeling guilty, right? But for me, I'd say Pat is always at work, feeling guilty when she's at work because she's not home with the family, and guilty when she's at home because she's so far behind at work. She wants to sell big ticket or more big ticket, but she can't be on the phone all day, which is her idea of selling big ticket. You got to have the strategy sessions and the phone calls. And she doesn't have the know-how or time to develop a webinar or a VSL or the money to hire a big league copywriter. Or maybe she has the money, but she doesn't want to risk $25,000 on a VSL or sales letter that may or may not work. That might even be better, right? She'd love to sell it through email, is where I'm getting to what's missing. She'd love to sell it through email, but doesn't think you can sell big ticket through email without being a great writer, especially if she's trying to sell a 1K to 5K product. She has a list but doesn't think it's big enough or responsive enough to be the answer to her big ticket problem. Sure, she can eke out 10 or 20 $97 sales, but she doesn't have the writing chops to sell 5 or 10, 5,000 products at a time. You've got to be a really good writer to do that. So I kind of just spun that off a little bit longer, right? But that story, that plot, is going to make up the basis for my whole 10-day to 15-day campaign. I'm just going to highlight out and dramatize it a little bit, right? So now I go in and I look at my CAP. What's my CAP? So the overt benefit is selling big ticket, right? I could even make it even more overt by saying selling 1K to 5K product or services. So that's even more. If I can say 1K or 5K, you can imagine a 1K or 5K payment going into your bank account, right? Or selling big ticket. So I'm just going to read you what I have. Overt benefit is sell big ticket so they can have more time to spend doing stuff they like, spending time with family, friends, etc. That's the emotional side. Closeness, love, especially if you're speaking to a woman, they value, I won't say men don't value relationships or value closeness. It's just typically on a different priority level. Men typically, and again, I hate to say this like I'm saying it, but as a general rule, a lot of times accomplishment is what drives men more so than family. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I'm just saying that speaking to the child, a lot of times accomplishment. For women, it is, and again, I'm not saying they're not driven by accomplishment, but closeness with relationships and even their ambitions with their businesses a lot of times is to connect to people that need the help, right? So sell big ticket stuff and they have more time spent doing stuff they like, spending time with family, friends, etc. That's the overt benefit. Then the kitchen table logic, obviously, is going to be email mojo is what's missing, right? So they got the ooh, and then they're like, right? So ooh is the big face. Yes, I want to sell big tickets so I can have more time spending doing stuff I like, spending time with the family, friends, and etc. Or they wouldn't say etc. But then they're like, and the finger goes to the temple. So email mojo. And here's the case that I would make. Great writing is not what makes big ticket sales. Just like sharpening an axe. More won't necessarily help you chop down bigger trees. But even a small chainsaw can help you fall mighty oaks. Email mojo is your chainsaw, and you'll go from saplings to big ticket oak trees without getting on the phone or doing DSLs or webinars. So I might have to massage that a bit or play that out a little bit more in my emails, but that's my basic kitchen table logic that goes against, not against, but what she's already thinking, what she thinks stopping her, right, is that I'm not a great writer. Hope some lights are coming on. And then the dramatic difference, there's actually a couple here, but there's really nobody out there saying, as far as email goes, that I'm going to show you how to write email without being a great writer. Most of the email courses out there say, hey, we're going to show you how to write persuasive emails. And then, again, I'm not beating up on anybody. These are great courses, but then you look at the soap opera sequence, which is 37 bubbles, right? And if you can map out and write 37 bubble campaign, then this is the course for you, right? If you can't, if you're not a great writer, then you can be put off by that, right? Also, the other thing is I'm the only person, and it sounds like being braggadocious, I'm trying to be braggadocious, but it's showing how to sell big ticket from email without the VSL, without the webinar, without the phone call. So people doing emails to strategy sessions or emails to webinar, not really even teaching the email to webinar, but most of their systems depend on having a great sales letter, a great VSL, or some type of webinar in the flow. So that's dramatically different. It's something that they can see. I don't have to spend a lot of time explaining it, right? They can get it immediately. Does that make sense? Just to recap, your fun work is to figure out the simple plot for your next. You can even do it for your business. What's the simple plot for my business, right? And then you can have multiple subplots come out for that. But for this specific fun work, I want you to think about the simple plot as we get ready to roll into your Rainmaker campaign. What's the overall theme? What's the plot going to be? The biggest tip I can give you is the simpler it is to understand, the more successful it is. It's got to be meaningful and simple. Dear Lord, please save me. I'm going to talk politics for a minute. There's not a good or bad to this, but right now the election is going on. I'm not making a judgment call, and I do have my own leanings, but from a simple plot standpoint, the Democrats have a way simpler plot to understand than the Republicans. The Democrats' plot basically is Pat is middle class, Pat's suffering, the Heaven Island is to be successful and prosperous, right? Pretty simple so far. What's stopping them is the evil rich people, and the way to get Pat from Hell Island to Heaven Island is to get the rich to pay their fair share. Now, again, I'm not saying right or wrong, bad or good. I'm not going to put my political leanings into this. But very, very simple plot. It's Pat with a worthwhile goal, with an enemy that she can see and point to. In movies, right? Think about all the enemies in the movies. You can see guys in their Mercedes and all that kind of, she can see this stuff every day with a real simple solution. Get the rich people to pay their fair share. The Republicans don't have such a simple plot. Basically, the plot right now is, well, it's even hard for me to encapsulate it, but the basic gist of it is government is corrupt, or at least maybe this is Donald Trump's plot, but the problem is big government. That's more the Republican side. The problem is big government. The problem with government means different things to all kinds of different people. And government even means good things to a lot of people, right? People getting Medicare and Social Security, that means good things to them, right? But you can't really point a finger at it as easy as you can rich people. The big problem there, right? The problem is big government. Pat Pat's not doing well, wants to be prosperous, but the problem is big government, right? How do we get around big government? How do we fix big government? Again, the solution is not clear. The resolution is not clear, right? So therefore, from a simple plot perspective, Democrats have such an easier time. They have a very, very clear hell. They have a very, very clear heaven. But more importantly, remember the sales always won and lost in between, right? It's really easy to create the gap. Doesn't mean Pat's going to cross it unless you do a great job in the A and the P, which is the adult and the parent, right? Clarity must be very, very clear. It must be a clear enemy with a clear resolution that makes sense. And if it's new, and that's kind of what the Democrats don't have going for them, they really don't have a dramatic difference. But if it's something new or dramatically different, that's going to help justify or help the judger in people, right? So that was a recap, which was kind of long, but I just want to be really, really clear. Come up with a simple plot. If you want to write it out a little bit, that's cool. If you find it easier to write it out longhand and then simplify it, that's cool too. I find myself doing both things. You want a very simple plot, and then you want to overlay your CAP sales work, and is what Pat's going through right now, is it going to make sense with your CAP, right? Do you have the overt benefit? Do you have kitchen table logic on how this works? And then do you have something that's dramatically different? Again, it doesn't have to be big different. Just has to be something they can say, oh, okay, that makes sense for me, right? The facts advertising make inherent sense to these restaurant owners. Like, yeah, I mean, the radio is expensive because I have to advertise to everybody, but if I could just get it to go to these offices that are my best lunchtime, my best carry-out order people, that would be awesome. And then when I show it to them, they're like, here's all the offices that are, 200 offices here and the 23,000 people that work in those 200 offices. And they could see it, right? They're like, oh, yeah, they order here, and nobody else is doing that. So you want to set up a situation that's dramatically different. So I always feel like I'm tooting my own horn, but guys, this is applicable to Facebook, it's applicable to your webinars, it's applicable to everything. This CAP sales system is along with the Braingasm, is probably, when it goes to my messaging, one of the things that's really, really responsible for me having winner after winner, or when I'm having a loser, understanding why it's a loser and cutting it off and just making millions of dollars. So I hope you guys will really focus in and study this and apply it to what you're doing. And again, this course gets easier and easier as this training gets easier and easier as you go through it. So if you set up your simple plot, when we roll into the Rainmaker campaign, you're like, man, that's pretty easy. If you haven't done a lot of the homework, then you're like, oh, goodness gracious, I got a lot to do, right? So this is kind of my fatherly encouragement. I know everybody here can do it. I know it can be a challenge sometimes with everything that's going on.